I played a horror ghost hunting game IRL. Let me begin by saying that I am an avid horror indulger. I like pretty much anything and everything scary, short of pure gore. My favorite movie has always been Paranormal Activity, the first one, not the crapstorm that followed, and my favorite author is Stephen King. I spend a ridiculous amount of time playing horror computer games. It should then come as no surprise that I jumped at the occasion of being a tester for the new horror game Pilot that came out last month. This was the first horror game ever created IRL, in real life, mimicking the new fad in computer games that I won't name for copyright reasons, where you normally travel to a haunted house, find the ghost, and exorcise it. God, I was so excited when I heard the news that such a game was happening. I put my name down last year and finally was selected to participate in the beta testing. I had two options. I could either participate with a group of strangers or I could bring my friends, up to a maximum of 6 players. Luckily for me, I have been in the horror scene for so long that I could muster up 5 more people who were as equally excited as I was. We spent a fortune getting to the location, as we were all out of state RS, but c'est la vie, as the French say. We were all working adults with money to spend, and we did. I won't bore you with the mundane details of our arrival, suffice it to say we all got on location timely. The plan was simple: get to the house, have a quick run-through guided by the game makers, and then go play. We were booked for 3 hours of play, which the game makers estimated would mean a good 2 to 3 rounds. Now, for those familiar with the aforementioned video games, feel free to just skim this next introductory bit, just to spot differences between computer and IRL play styles. For those of you who are completely clueless, I will try to explain the game in a way that won't make your head spin. The purpose of this game is simple, simpler than on PC. Find and identify the ghost type. No special quests, no extra tasks. There were 6 potential aggressive ghost types: Spirit, Demon, Jinn, Wraith, Oni, and Mare, and Casper, the friendly ghost. There were also 4 types of equipment we were allowed to carry, to be used to find evidence: EMF readers, thermometers, sound recorders, and cameras. Additionally, we were also given flashlights, lighters, and walkie-talkies. So, to recap the simple basics, use tools to find evidence and identify the ghost. The end. Upon arrival on location, we were presented with some forms to sign, and waivers in case anything happened. It seemed sensible. The standard was we are not responsible if you fall down the stairs and break your leg, blah blah, but we can sue you if you set the house on fire. Afterward, we were escorted to the back of a big white van, parked right outside the house, which contained all the equipment, and each handed some material to read. Firstly, information on the equipment, type, and amount. 2x EMF reader counts as evidence only when the EMF meter indicates red, henceforth known as red EMF for evidence purposes. 2x thermometer only counts as evidence when the temperatures go below 0, freezing temperatures for evidence purposes. 2x sound recorder, record yourself asking your question and give the ghost a few seconds to reply. Then you play it back to yourself and listen to see if the ghost said anything. SR for evidence purposes. 2x camera, walk around with it turned on, not recording, and spot any sort of ghost activity. This normally looks like a foggy gray humanoid-like appearance, only seen through the lens of the camera. Ghost particle for evidence purposes. 6x flashlights, self-explanatory. There are spares. 3x lighters can be used to light the candles scattered throughout the house. 6x walkie-talkies, self-explanatory. There are spares. For a fully immersive experience, we strongly advise you to leave your mobile phones in the van at the front entrance. Next, very brief information about the ghosts. Spirit wants to be seen and heard. has a story to tell, can become aggressive to get others to listen to it. Evidence: ghost particles and SR demon, the vile, hell-spawned creature that only wants to hurt people. Evidence: red EMF and SR Jinn, ghosts that have been tremendously hurt during their lives. Want to inflict the same pain on others? Evidence: red EMF and ghost particles wraith, a creature that feeds on the weak-minded. Evidence: red EMF and freezing temperatures, Oni, an evil creature that possesses exceptional strength. Can and will use items around the room to hurt others. Evidence: SR and freezing temperatures, Merv, malicious spirits that want to inflict emotional pain and fear. Evidence: ghost particles and freezing temperatures, Casper, the friendly ghost, just wants hugs. Evidence: all. Finally, a list of rules. The round starts when everybody is in the house and you declare start round. The doors will lock behind you, so be sure to bring all items inside first, including the spare flashlights and walkie-talkies. The round ends when you have agreed upon the ghost type and you declared ghost type is _______. If you do not agree on a ghost type, try to select by majority. Once you have declared the ghost type, the doors will unlock and you will be informed whether you were right or not. Please vacate the house after each round for 15 minutes, not deducted from your time, to allow for the game makers to reset the house and prepare for the next round. The ghost tends to haunt one room or hallway. That is to say, the evidence produced will appear there. The ghost's location does not change throughout a round, but will change from one round to another. You can all stick together, but it is advised to break into smaller groups to speed up the process. If you have angered the ghost, it will haunt you. During this time it can leave the room, which normally haunts and chases you. You are advised to hide. If it finds you and lays a hand on you, you will be considered dead and will be asked to leave the premises for the duration of the round, go upstairs and in the room marked under construction. A ghost haunt will stop by itself after 90 seconds or immediately if a player has died. That's it. Have fun and enjoy being ghost hunters for the day. P.S. Please do not try to fight the ghost and or prank them. They are paid actors and will not harm you. Once we all got accustomed to the documentation, we were eager and ready to start. And there we were, the 6 of us, just looking at the entrance door of the beautiful mansion that stood in front of us. It was breathtaking, Victorian Gothic if I were to guess, with 3 floors and a tower in the middle. All dark gray brick with a black roof. It was an impressive sight for sure, and there at dawn, under the purple sun, it was even a little spine-chilling. "All right, let's not be chicken," Andrew barked as he opened the door. Based on his intonation, one would expect that he'd slam it right open, but I could tell he was nervous when instead he pushed it open slowly and walked in. Benjamin and Mark followed right after, which was surprising to me, as Benjamin was always a scaredy cat online. But maybe he wanted to impress his boyfriend, even if Mark and he had been together for quite some years. Then went Jennifer, and that I had expected, as the girl usually had a pair bigger than all of us put together. Afterwards, Angela, Benjamin's sister, and myself. We were similar in the sense that we were both all bark and no bite. We entered into a long hallway. At the end of the hallway, there were the stairs to what I could only assume was the second floor, and to the left and right of us, closed doors. "All right, shall we start then?" Angela asked impatiently. "I think we should maybe take the game maker's advice into consideration and do a quick reconnaissance tour," Jennifer so sensibly proposed. The suggestion was accepted unanimously, and we proceeded with opening every single door on the bottom floor. We found a large storage, a guest bathroom, and an impressively immense living room, complete with a fireplace, a piano, a beautiful satin 3-seater, Then on the other side of the hallway, a Gothic dining room with black chairs and a black table, above which, straight in center, a candle candelabra and a somewhat rustic kitchen. We then went upstairs, where the narrow hallway at the top of the stairs was met with yet another, slightly larger horizontal hallway. Similarly to downstairs, each side of the hallway held quite some closed doors. We discovered a couple of bedrooms and the under construction room just opposite the stairs. On the side of the stairs, to its right, a kid's room and a big bathroom, a bit ridiculous in my opinion, with a big tub straight in the middle of it, surrounded by one of those room separators you see in TV shows about kings and queens. To its left, a large unfurnished room, some moving boxes scattered around. We assumed the game makers did not have the funds to finish it, so they left it to look like the family who'd moved and there was just not done unpacking. Not uninspired. "All right, I guess now we can start," Andrew noted after we'd all gone downstairs and into the van to grab all our equipment. "Right. Start round," I declared. "No need to yell, players. We have ears everywhere." We confirmed the start of the round. "As this is your first round, take your time. We grant you a grace period of 15 minutes before the ghost even appears," we heard the game makers reply. "We will announce when the time is up." We all stood in the hallway, poking at the equipment and trying to figure out how it all worked. Apart from the brief instructions in the van, we didn't have much to go on, and I had never seen an EMF reader in real life before. Once we got the hang of which buttons to press, how to turn stuff on, and how to interpret the information on the equipment, Mark broke the silence. "We split up then? 3 upstairs, 3 downstairs? That makes the most sense, seeing as we have 2 of each piece of evidence equipment," Jennifer agreed. "Then us 3, upstairs," she gestured at Benjamin, herself, and me, the 3 of us standing on one side of the hallway. "And you 3, down here? And then we can mix up each round?" On our team side, I grabbed the EMF, Ben grabbed the camera and Jen picked up the thermometer, and each of us took a walkie-talkie and a flashlight. I also grabbed a lighter and proceeded to light all the candles that I could see along the way. Unlike the online game, this house had no actual lights, light generators, or anything we could use to see but candles and our flashlights. "I doubt we'll use this before we figure out the room," she declared, grabbing the sound recorder and shoving it down her back pocket. As agreed, we headed up the stairs and began using our tools. We started on the right with the big bathroom and the kids' room, and across the hall in the first bedroom. We weren't quite sure what we were looking for, but we assumed it wouldn't be all that different from the online games we'd played, so we had our eyes out for lower temperatures and slight EMF interference. 15 minutes are up, we heard the game makers announce, startling us. "Right, so now we're fair game," Benjamin confirmed. I could sense some of the scaredy-cat behavior behind his somewhat soft, whispered voice. "Better identify hiding places then," I said, thinking out loud. As I would pass certain locations, like big wardrobes or beds with enough space underneath to hide, I'd make a mental note. Not long after the 15-minute announcement, the guys from the other team walkie-talkied us. "I think we got the bastard," Angela announced. "Got some cold air around this kitchen." "On our way," I responded as we made our way back downstairs. The kitchen was just at the bottom of the stairs, on the left. I am not sure whether it was because of the excitement of potentially facing the ghost soon, or because it truly was so, but I felt the room was much colder than the rest of the house. The thermometers were showing around 40 FAHR, but that could not be. They were controlled by the game makers somehow, but it did not feel like mid-60s anymore either. Despite all 6 of us being crammed into the kitchen, there was an eerie quietness surrounding us. We were all listening, scared we'd miss something if we talked. The kitchen was rustic and not very fancy, mostly dark with fake black marble countertops. As I was taking in everything around me, I noticed the slightest flicker reflecting in the black washstand right next to me. This, in turn, directed my gaze to the opposing wall, where a candle just appeared to have been blown out. "Did you see that?" I whispered, but I did not have a chance to get a reply as more candles were being put out by an invisible force. We all held our breaths, almost in unison, but nothing else seemed to happen. After what seemed like a very long time, I finally, Andrew speak. "So, what do we have so far?" he asked. "Well, no light," Mark replied facetiously. "I meant in terms of evidence," he countered, not being amused. The atmosphere was tense, unlike in the online game. We all felt a little off, a little unhinged. "We don't have any evidence as far as I can tell," Jen replied, as she moved across the room to relight the candles. I decided to help and pulled my own lighter out. I flicked it to ignite the spark, and just as I moved it toward the candle, a light breeze blew it out again. This time I felt the cold wind on my fingers, and it made me shriek. Then, remembering I was playing a horror game, I started laughing. That seemed to lighten the mood all around, as everybody joined in. Unfortunately, that didn't last long, as an apparition seemed to come from the wall and stop an inch away from my face, yelling right before it disappeared again, making me drop my flashlight and leaving me in complete darkness for a second. Grateful to my bladder for not failing me, I recollected and picked up my flashlight. The roar of laughter was even louder this time. "Fuck me, that was good," Angela commented. "Yeah, 'cause you're seeing it from over there," Jen said from next to me. She was also laughing, but clearly, the two of us were slightly more distraught. "I need a moment," I claimed, getting out of the kitchen and walking towards the exit. As I was trying to get out, I realized that we needed to end the round first, and I didn't want to ruin anyone's game, but I was feeling a little suffocated. You see, there are two types of reactions to danger: flight or fight. I was so far on the flight side that all I wanted at that very moment was to break a window and get out. Luckily, the moment passed quickly and I managed to compose myself. I loved it and hated it at the same time, but I wanted to finish it, for myself and also for the others. "You good?" Andrew asked from the kitchen door. I could barely see him from his flashlight at times. Then I realized his flashlight was flickering. In the online game, that meant the ghost was haunting. "Hide," I yelled as I bolted towards the storage room next to the entrance. I wasn't sure if they realized it too or not, but I threw myself behind a stack of big shelves and started counting down from 90. I hadn't made it past 30 when I could hear the game makers announce, "Please make your way to the under construction room now," and I realized someone died. Ironically, this made me feel better. It made it all seem like a game, the announcement, the fake death. It removed some of the tightness I was feeling in my chest, and I returned to the kitchen. "So Mark bit the dust," Andrew informed me as I entered. "We couldn't get out of the kitchen, as the ghost bolted out of that cabinet over there, and it just went for the first person in its way." "But look, we have 28 degrees now," Angela exclaimed. "So, we have freezing temps, and we know it's not the friendly ghost, as it did not hug Mark," she added, giggling. "So that means it could be a wraith, one, or a mare," Benjamin interjected, checking his info package. Most of us left ours in the van. I was grateful that Benjamin was generally an overly prepared know-it-all right now. "I don't get any significant EMF," I added, looking down at it. Although just as I said, my EMF went crazy. It wasn't a steady red, it was all over the place, from red to 0 back to red. "Wait, does this count?" I asked, fighting the urge to throw the EMF across the room. I think it does, Jen confirmed. That'd be a wraith then, Benjamin said. Great, shall we give the game makers our answer then, and go again? I asked, excited by the prospect of some fresh air. Aye. Ghost type is wraith, Andrew confirmed. You are correct, ghost hunters, came the voice of the game makers. Please grab all your equipment and vacate the house, which should now be unlocked. Return in 15 minutes. We started grabbing all our things as Mark joined us from upstairs, and we all left, sharing impressions and feelings. The second round went a little bit better in the sense that the ghost was in the living room, and it was Casper. So we all gave him a big hug and vacated again for 15 minutes. All in all, we had about an hour and 20 minutes left, enough for a game, maybe even two. Start the game, Andrew said. You three down, us three up, he said, separating us into two teams. It was Jen, him, and me upstairs and the other three on the ground floor. This was now our third round, and we had become comfortable with the house and the equipment, so the initial setup was fast and smooth. While the first two rounds had been pretty straightforward when it came to evidence, we quickly learned that it was not the case now. I think I have EMF 5 here, Angela walkie-talked us from downstairs. All right, we're on our way down, I replied while Andrew and myself headed for the stairs. Jen was in the farthest room of the house, so she was lagging. I think it's in the kitchen again, Angela said, meeting us at the bottom of the stairs. Hang on guys, came Jen's voice through the walkie-talkie. I'm getting freezing temps in this empty bedroom. I think at least. Andrew took out his own EMF and sure enough, it was a high response, but it was not a clear 5. I think the evidence is not as straightforward anymore, he concluded. Best make sure we get it right. All right, from the top then, I said, going back upstairs. Jen's in the empty room on the left, so you check the bathroom and bedroom on the right, and I'll go across from you in the first bedroom, okay? Andrew said to me as soon as we had reached the second floor again. That way we cover most ground, then we regroup and switch tools. I nodded and followed instructions. I was manning a camera with infrared, looking for ghost particles, so my flashlight was a mere hindrance. As I entered the bathroom, something seemed off, however. The shower atop the bathtub, the one awkwardly placed in the middle of the room and partly concealed by a room divider, seemed to be running. Guys, I think it's here. I ran out of the room and yelled down the hall, forgetting about the walkie-talkie in my excitement. I went back into the bathroom, ignoring all my survivor's instincts, camera held towards the bathtub. I couldn't quite make out what was happening through the little camera screen, so I decided to put it down and fumbled for my flashlight. As I turned it on, I heard a loud splash coming from the bathtub. What the? I said to myself, and I walked carefully a little closer. Then I saw it, a leg. A fully dressed, wet leg was coming out of the water. To my initial relief, and then immediate panic, the leg was attached to a man. The dude, absolutely huge in appearance, was rising from the tub, completely soaked. I froze and felt like I couldn't move a muscle. He was immense and wore what looked like black leather pants and a simple white t-shirt, which, wet, clung to his skin. He had long, messy black hair. Who are you? I asked, but nobody replied. The man, now completely upright, bent over and grabbed something from behind the room divider. A chainsaw. He was now completely turned to me, holding the chainsaw with both hands, pulling out the starter rope. The chainsaw started revving, and the sound startled me out of my mental block. Shit, I thought to myself. This felt wrong. This was not part of the game. That did not look like a prop. A million thoughts ran through my head at the same time, all of them directing me towards the nearest exit, and not in a calm and orderly fashion. Instinctively, I threw my camera at him, startling him, and started to run towards the door. "Guys, run, get out," I yelled help. But just as I started screaming, music started blasting through the speakers, muffling my voice. Nobody could hear me. The doors were probably still locked. I had to warn everyone and get out. I ran into Andrew Wright in the hallway and grabbed his hand. He looked startled. "Don't think this is part of the game." "Dude has a chainsaw in there," I said, dragging him towards the stairs. "You serious?" he asked incredulously. "It's locked." "Phew!" I yelled, realizing the door at the top of the stairs wouldn't budge. "Yeah, I'm serious," I confirmed, although I didn't need to. As Andrew flashed his light behind us, we caught a glimpse of him walking slowly out of the bathroom, grinning. Sick fuck, he was enjoying this. "Guys," I yelled as I ran into the unfurnished bedroom. But everybody was mesmerized by the music and the gimmicks, thinking it was part of the game. "Guys, we gotta get out," I tried again as I pushed the window open. Nobody was paying attention to me except for Andrew. They were into all their tools, which seemed to have gone crazy. I climbed out the window and Andrew followed me. I looked down. It was a long way, but it looked like there was a trash can right below, filled with leaves and grass. I hoped to God it would break my fall. "Guys," I tried again, as the guy was now standing in the door frame. Jen looked at me, not completely understanding what I was doing halfway out the window. By the time realization hit her, the guy's chainsaw was halfway through Benjamin. I didn't stick around. I couldn't. I jumped. Andrew followed. We both made it out okay, but no one else managed to follow. We made a run for our phones, which were in a van outside. 911, what is your emergency? I tried my best to explain what was happening, and then Andrew and I ran and hid behind some trees in the forest. After what seemed like an eternity, the guy came out of the house, through the front door, which was no longer locked. He looked around a couple of times, probably for us, but as he couldn't spot us, he went to the van, closed the tailgate doors, got in, and drove off. The police came about 10 minutes later, followed by an ambulance. We ran to them and told them in more detail what had happened. They went inside and confirmed that everybody was dead, including the game makers behind the under construction room. Andrew and I were asked to ride in the ambulance because even though there was nothing physically wrong with us, they decided we needed to be monitored closely after such events. We didn't comment. There was no trace of the man and his van. Nobody knew if he was part of the crew or some other maniac. It didn't matter. Ghost type is a massive murderer, Andrew said from his bed in the ambulance before collapsing onto it. I laughed a sorrowful laugh and collapsed myself. If only I'd been more insistent in that bedroom, if only I didn't find this stupid game in the first place. Grief overwhelmed me then, and guilt overwhelms me to this day. The Goose, a cryptid hunting story. One day the trailer park supervisor came to my door knocking and calling for me. I thought it was for the rent and tried to climb up and out the roof vent to hide or make an escape, but once I had crawled out I found myself looking at a fancy pair of foreign black loafers. I looked up to find the gangly, tall, thin, well-dressed supervisor looking down at me. How did he get up here so fast? "My dear Clint, the owner is visiting and has a monetary matter he would like to discuss with you." I just need another week. I'll get your tithe. I desperately pleaded. He massaged his forehead as if trying to relieve a migraine. He wants to hire you, peasant. Exited, I pushed my way up to my feet, leaped off my trailer, and ran to the supervisor's trailer outside of the park, desperate to meet the owner of the park and land a new job. When I got to the super's trailer, I found it locked. Mr. Cletus, the super, yelled out to me from behind. Again, how did he get there so fast? He was summoning me to a massive, expensive-looking RV with dark, tainted windows. I ran into it, eager for my next payday. The inside was dark. No sunlight could pierce those tainted windows, but it appeared empty. He is in the back, the super told me, and he began to walk back to his trailer. I looked into the darkness, and suddenly a door slowly creaked open, revealing a faint glow of light. I walked into the far back and into the room to find a pale, well-dressed, beautiful man sitting in a chair alongside a massive box underneath a lit candle hanging from the back wall. In his lap, he was petting a goose. Mr. Cletus, I presume, he asked in a fancy European accent. I introduced myself and offered to shake his hand, but he merely stared at me until I retracted my hand. I assume Carl told you about the bounty I need you to collect for me, he asked OHNO. No way. After that Eldritch crap last time, I am retired, I responded and began to walk away from him. I'd rather be evicted than hunt any more cryptids. I love myself too much to throw myself into such danger ever again, or so I thought. Fernan Gooseback, the man screamed behind me, and the goose flew past me. It landed on the floor halfway to the exit, turned, and began to contort and grow. Its feathers fell out and it began to grow fur. Within 30 seconds it transformed into a furry T-Rex type of thing, hissing and chasing me back into the room with the man. An Anatidae lycanthrope hybrid, previously thought impossible, but I successfully created one after nearly a century and a half of research and botched attempts. Fernan is quite friendly as long as his master is content. There was a long, awkward moment of silence where only the low, muffled hiss of the beast on the other side of the door was the only sound. So you his master, and if I don't make you happy it's going to tear me to pieces, right? I asked. The man responded with a smile. Okay, tell me about this cryptid. To summarize what happened next, I was hired to hunt down some sort of sentient pool algae that crawls inside and eats brains, and there's no known way to hurt it. Seemed easy, find it, put it in an empty moonshine jar, and rent paid. He also warned me that it may evolve, but everyone knows that evolution is a myth, like unicorns, zombies, Al Gore, or vampires. Wait a minute, the pale, beautiful, super old, foreign man who owns the trailer park and avoids sunlight couldn't be a vampire, could he? No, of course not. There weren't any pools in the area that I knew of, so I drove around trying to find one for 3 full days, but couldn't find any. On the 4th day, I gave up and went to the town park to chill and score some pot off of Shifty, real name Eddie, the local high school dealer. We sat on a bench overlooking the town pond and had a few smokes. After a while, I noticed a flock of geese had snuck up and surrounded us. Shifty got paranoid and insisted that they were police-trained narc ducks. Took off. I stared down every single goose, terrified that they would transform into furry T-Rexes. They all simultaneously began to violently throw up and fell over dead. Their vomit began to rapidly approach me as if it was sentient and intended to harm me. It moved so fast and began to shoot out in a way similar to tentacles. It was malicious and I ran for my life. I made it to my truck and took off. I was looking for pool algae, so I decided it was best to just get the heck out of there. Maybe they were sent by the park owner to scare me because I was slacking. I decided to visit him to try to get more info or advice about the situation. Turns out the goose puke was the pool algae, and fronting gooseback is not affected by sunlight, and after seeing it in the light I could now see it has massive sharp teeth and raptor-like talons on its hind feet. You see, when I asked him about the goose puke and informed him of my hasty retreat, he was very angry and had his demon goose attack me. Now I need to find and catch the algae or be eaten by Fernan and not get paid. My cousin was killed on a hunting trip. This happened in 1998. I was 15, on vacation visiting my mother's side of the family in Bar None, Wyoming. Needless to say, I wasn't excited. Wyoming was a whole lot of nothing, and Bar None was just a small subsection of nothing. About 700 people lived there at the time. There were no shopping malls, no arcade, not even a fucking Dollar General. The only local business that I remember seeing was a shit-shack little gas station called the Dog Pound. After driving for 10 hours, we arrived at my uncle's house. He and my cousins ran out of the house to greet us. Michael, who was 16, and David, who was 13, looked ecstatic to see us. We barely left the car when Michael practically dragged my brother, Max, and me into his room. He told us he had big plans for the night ahead. He told us that the night before we'd arrived, their chicken coop had been ravaged, likely by coyotes. He and David had been outside washing away blood and collecting feathers all morning. I failed to realize where he was going with this, so I told him. At which point, he smiled and slowly pointed to his bed. On it were 2 shotguns. He put his finger to his lips and quietly shushed us. We weren't to tell our parents about our newfound plan, but I was still excited. At this point, I'd never shot a gun, which I'd been eager to try ever since playing GoldenEye. I'd raised concerns about being attacked, but he assured me that coyotes were afraid of people and that we'd be fine. So, that very night, the 4 of us set out for the woods. We'd crept out of David's window with our flashlights and guns. The moon shone brightly that night, enough to see the outlines of the mountains that surrounded us. Along the way, Michael lectured me on gun safety. Treat all guns as if they're loaded. Keep your finger off the trigger until you intend to shoot. Never point a weapon at a person. That sort of thing. I held on to every word. I was filled with nervous excitement. The type you get while waiting in line for a roller coaster. As we came up in the woods, we could hear coyotes yelping and howling stupidly in the distance. It was so dark under the cover of the tall trees. If we hadn't brought our flashlights, we might have turned around right there. We slinked through a few narrow paths before coming up on a large tree stand, which my uncle used for deer hunting. It sat about 20 feet above the ground, accessible only by ladder. Michael had brought a joint with him, which the 4 of us sparked up immediately upon gaining entry. Michael and I sat for about an hour, bullshitting, while Max and David kept watch for coyotes at the windows. We were having an amusing enough time. So much so that I'd forgotten why we'd gone there in the first place. That is until David reminded me. "Guys, over here," he whispered excitedly. The 3 of us crept over to him. "Watch this," he said. He flipped on his flashlight. Expecting to see a pack of coyotes that I could rain hell upon, I was disappointed to see that there was nothing down there. "What the fuck are you talking about, David?" said Michael angrily. "Shoot," said David. "Look out there," he whispered. A moment later, I saw it too. About 30 feet past the clearing's tree line were two shining eyes. They looked to be a ways off of the ground, giving the illusion that whatever had spotted us was very tall. This deeply disturbed my brother, Max, who was 13 at the time. He shuffled to the corner of the treehouse as if he meant to hide. He began to cry. We were annoyed. We'd tell him that it was just an animal, but it was no use. He wanted to return to my uncle's house and wouldn't calm down until he got there. Michael and I wanted to stay, so I gave my shotgun to David, who had agreed to walk him back. We pointed the flashlight out the window to see that the eyes were no longer there, and with that, the boys headed back towards my uncle's. Michael and I laughed at the way that Max shuffled to the trail, mimicking his cries. We were enjoying the peace. But the silence that followed their leave lasted only a short while. Only 5 minutes later, we both heard 3 distinct booms. Gunshots in sequence. Michael and I looked at each other excitedly. We flung open the tree stand trap door and practically slid down the ladder. We ran in the direction of the gunshots, excited to shoot some coyotes. And then I heard something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Through the trees, I could hear my brother crying. Not crying like he was before, though. He was shrieking, yelling. Primal noises that I've never heard before. Our run gave way to a frantic sprint. I called my brother's name 100 times, but he wouldn't respond. We could only follow his screams of terror. We must have run a quarter mile before finding him in the fetal position on the ground, clutching David's shotgun. The back of his jacket was nearly torn in two, but he seemed unharmed. He told us that something had tackled the two of them and that when David shot at it, it took him. I felt my stomach drop. I was sick. Michael was yelling at Max. What was it? Where the fuck is David? Max pointed to a mess of broken tree branches and toppled saplings. It dragged him over there, he told us in a broken voice. I took the shotgun from him and quickly followed Michael through the path, keeping a lookout for any broken branches that could alert us to where David might have been. We must have called his name 100 times. We shot our guns in the air but got no response. Max clutched onto me tightly, hindering my ability to walk straight. I was just so fucking thankful that he was safe so I didn't hound him for it. This next part is still a bit of a blur to me. It all happened so fast. We came up upon a small patch of blood. Michael's knees buckled as he began to whimper quietly. Then, loudly, he yelled one final time. David! A nearby tree suddenly jolted. Small sticks and trees rained upon us. And then I heard it drip, 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 drip. I aimed my flashlight wildly, not sure where to look. Drip, 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 drip. It was coming from beside me. The puddle of blood was expanding. I pointed the flashlight up, slowly. David's body was draped over a thick tree branch 30 feet above us. Blood ran down his arm and dripped from his fingers. His arm was bent at an impossible angle, and despite him lying belly up, his head was facing us. His legs twitched like he was being electrocuted. I threw up. Max couldn't handle it. He was positively freaking the fuck out. I didn't stop him. And Michael just stared up into the tree. I'll never forget the look on his face. The tree jolted once more. I pointed my flashlight wildly again. I told Michael to pick up his fucking gun and help me, but he was attempting to climb the tree. I forced it into Max's shaking hands. I shined my flashlight on Michael, who had stopped moving. I froze. Something was wrong. I scanned the tree with my flashlight, and for the first time, I saw it. Just 10 feet above Michael, staring dead into his eyes, was the largest fucking cougar I have ever seen. It stood completely still, with its mouth ajar. The thing's mouth was painted red. Blood dripped from its claws and fangs. It hissed like a python as Michael slowly attempted to climb down. I drew my shotgun and shot in its direction. That very second, it pounced on Michael. Both of them fell to the ground as it began to maul Michael. If I would have shot it then, there was a possibility I'd kill Michael. I shot my gun in the air twice to scare it away, but it wouldn't leave us alone. Michael's screams were ear-piercing. The cougar continued to claw and bite at Michael's face. I was frozen in place. Shoot it! Fucking kill this thing now! Michael yelled. So I did. I aimed high to avoid hitting Michael, but as a result, only a fraction of the buckshot made contact with the cougar. Nonetheless, I drew blood. It shrieked as it turned to face me. I could see now that I'd shot out its left eye. The cougar crawled towards me slowly, hissing all the while. I couldn't shoot until I lured it far enough away from Michael that he wasn't at risk of being shot. Blood poured from its eye socket. I lunged at the cougar, yelling, but it wouldn't be deterred. It knew that it was mortally wounded. Suddenly it lunged once more. I shot without thinking, severing its hind leg. The creature cried as it pulled me to the ground. It clawed at my stomach and bit at my neck in a frenzy. I put my hands up to guard myself, but the beast bit my hand and began thrashing about wildly. This thing was going to kill me. A loud boom right beside me shattered my eardrums. The cougar's dead weight plopped on top of me. Max had shot the cougar point blank, killing it and saving my life. We buried my little cousin on that same trip. My husband has been infected and is now hunting me. I want to tell you all who read this in hopes you and your family can avoid the infection too. It all started when I was tending to my garden and trying my best to keep my prize-winning morel mushrooms growing in the shade. While I was working on the shading and adding more with chips, I could hear my husband calling my name. You see, we live in the middle of the woods, and behind our home are about 15 acres of land that we own. I called out to him to see what was wrong, but he just replied, it's hard to explain, just come here. As I weaved through a maze of thin brushes and wide oak trees, I kept calling out to him so I knew which way he was. Honey? I yelled out with concern, but shortly after I heard his voice, you're close, it's just across the creek. I jumped the creek, almost slipping on my ass, but catching myself on a root. As I walked over the small embankment, I saw my husband crouching over something. As I got closer, the sounds of the forest stopped, and it was dead silent, almost deafening so. When I got next to him, I saw what he was looking at. It was a deer dead on the forest floor. What the fuck, Frank, why did you want me to see a dead deer? He looked at me and pointed at its torso. Martha, look. It has this strange black mushroom growing from it. It was shiny and black with long black hairs like it was leaking ink. The other thing is the spores were spreading to the fur and eye of the deer. This is strange, honey. We should let nature take its course here, I said while backing away slowly. Well, Martha, I'm going to take one of these mushrooms home and study it in the lab. We have a lab so we can grow other mushrooms to sell to others. Surprisingly, some mushrooms are worth more than gold by weight. Okay, just be careful, you know some of the fungi here can be highly poisonous. He put on his gloves and pulled a small baggie out of his back pocket. He grabbed the large stalk by the base and gave it a good twist and pull. We walked back and I tended to the garden as he studied the mystery fungus. Moments later, he asked me to come to him in the lab. He had an interesting discovery that he wanted to show me. It's from the Coprinus comatus family, as I thought, but it has a different genetic structure and the inside of the stalk is filled with this black liquid. The only thing is it's not spores mixed with water, it's more or less than the blood of the dead deer. As if it was feeding on the deer. This took me by shock, as most mushrooms feed on plant life that dies in a wet, shaded area. So a mushroom feeding on a corpse is odd in itself. I chalked it up as him finding a new species, and I was admittedly excited. I mean, who wouldn't be? A week goes on and he's getting no attention from news outlets as new species are discovered every day, they would tell us. It hurt Frank, since this field of science was what he was all about. It's the main reason we had a mushroom farm. Hey, honey, it's okay. Sometimes these things happen to amazing discoveries. Just give it time, I said while rubbing his back. It's not that, Martha. I just spent my whole life studying fungus and am very passionate about this specific branch. It's my first breakthrough discovery and no one is caring about it. He sighed and held my hand. Martha, I love you and you are the best thing I have ever had the pleasure of discovering. I thought this was incredibly sweet and kind. I kissed Frank before telling him I was headed to bed for the night. I remember him saying he was going to run one more test on it before going to bed for the night. That night I felt him coming to bed, but he was quiet and felt cold. I didn't let it faze me, as he probably was exhausted from his research. When I awoke, Frank wasn't in bed, but in his lab. I got up and walked to the kitchen to make Frank and me some coffee. I made the coffee, which was a dark roast with 3 ounces of creamer and 2 sugar packets. The warm smell of coffee wafted in the beautiful air. I took the cup to the lab, but it was locked oddly enough, so I knocked and called out to Frank. Honey, I have coffee. As I waited, I heard shuffling of feet and heavy breathing. Leave it at the door for me, hon. I got something major. Just don't come in, please. I could hear something breaking and him yelling quietly to himself. I was curious, but I had my paper to write, so I left it alone. Later in the night, the coffee was still on the table next to the door. I finished my paper and submitted it, but that took almost 6 hours. I hesitated but knocked on the door. Honey, are you still in there? The door was locked, but I heard nothing. I asked again, honey. I am getting worried. Still no answer. I finally pulled out my keys and unlocked the door. I pushed the door in slowly and walked in quietly. The smell of iron was in the air and it felt stale. The taste of blood and dirt was pooling in the back of my throat. I quietly shuffled to the other side of the room and looked for Frank. He wasn't in the room, but the table that had the strange fungus was covered in the inky black substance with more fungus growing out of it. I looked at the closet and it was caked in this black, viscous liquid. I approached the closet. Although I was terror-stricken, I put on gloves and slowly opened the closet door. As the door creaked open, I was bombarded with an awful stench of rot and mold. In the closet was Frank. All of his skin was turning black and he was covered in spores and fungus. He had fungus protruding from his eyes and ears. Dried blood covered his face and he was a mess. I screamed and backed away. Frank! Oh God, why? I yelled out in desperation. I collapsed to the floor and threw my gloves off to wipe the tears from my face. I grabbed my hair and shook back and forth to try to calm down. Moments later, I heard him, "No, It spoke to me. Martha, I looked up and Frank's body shuffled toward me, but slowly. I scooted back out of fear and yelled, "What have you done to my husband?" The thing stopped and spoke slowly in his voice, but it was weak and cracking. "We are Frank. Join us, Martha." I shook my head and ran out the door. "Martha, come back. We love you." I grew louder and more intense. I quickly shut and locked the door before running out of the house to my car. I rented a motel a couple of cities out, and that's where I am at now, albeit not for long. I found something on me. It was a part of that weird fungus. I woke up last night to a tapping on my window. It was light and sounded more like someone was pressing something wet against it, as it made a splotching sound with every tap. I lowered the blinds just enough, and there was it. It followed me here. I made sure all my doors were locked, but I'm stuck here and the smell of rot is really strong. This morning I woke up needing to vomit. I ran to the bathroom and the same black liquid was coming out alongside maggots. I almost passed out staring into the bowl, but I knew what must be done. I had to warn people of this fungus, as the consequences would be dire if left unchecked. I'm Martha Stonewater will be heading out to a forest tonight and trying to take my own life before this thing can thrive in my body. Please stay away from any black fungus you may find. My God saves us all. The hunting trip. You and your family decide to drive out to the countryside to go on a hunting trip. This is a fun activity that you and your family have been doing for years, so naturally, you were pretty excited to go. Once the day came, you all piled into a big trucks depending on how big your family is, and started heading out. You have essentials in the bed of the truck, such as tents, varying guns, mostly shotguns, flashlights, food, water, etc. You brought your Polaroid camera with you so you can take some pictures to memorialize this family trip. After a few hours of driving, you all arrive at a heavy forest, surrounded by beautiful green trees, soft green grass, and wildlife calling out into the distance. It's a very tranquil and beautiful area, putting you at peace. For now, that is. You and your family start pitching the tents, cleaning, and loading the guns. Some go out into the woods to find wood for the fire you're gonna light, among other things. You start finding large stones and arrange them into a circle to serve as the fire pit. Afterward, your family ignites a warm flame in the fire pit and starts roasting s'mores. Since it's a bit later into the evening when you arrive, you all decide to wait until the next day to start hunting. You capture photos of the surrounding area, along with a few posing with your family. After a few hours of hanging out, you all climb into your tents and doze off, the noises of owls and other nocturnal creatures calling out into the warm breezy night lulling you into a calm, peaceful slumber. The following morning, you all wake up at around 7 a.m. to get a good head start on your hunting. You get your shotgun and follow a few of your family members to a section of the woods, while others go in different directions to cover as much ground as possible. You all find a suitable spot, get into position, and start hunting any wildlife that comes across your path. You believed hunting animals was all right just as long as you ate the meat from it and tried not to waste as much of it as possible. Humans are part of the food chain in some sort of sense, right? You and the others you join start to head back to the campsite, carrying/dragging the game you managed to hunt that day along with you. You got a couple of deer and a few rabbits, among other animals. Needless to say, you won't be going hungry tonight. The rest of your family all meet back up at the campsite. A few of them craft a makeshift spit to cook the meat with, while others start to prepare the meat to be cooked. You all gather around the fire pit, swapping stories, cracking open a few beers and sodas, enjoying the meat, roasting more s'mores, and overall having a good time. You bring portable speakers with you, and one of your family members connects their phone to them and plays music. You've always enjoyed trips like this, and for good reason. After a few hours, you all put out the fire, climb into your tents, and start drifting off into sleep yet again. A few hours later, you wake up, needing to go to the bathroom. You climb out of your tent and head toward the outhouse tent. Once you're done, you start heading back to your tent to go back to sleep. That's when you suddenly hear something in the distance. A screech. A horrific, demonic screech. You couldn't identify what kind of creature could have made a noise like that, and it sent chills down your spine. The screech must have woken up your family because they all start climbing out of their tents. They seem confused and nervous, not knowing what kind of creature could have made that noise either. They all start getting their guns and loading them just in case, and you do too. You also grab your Polaroid camera. Maybe you can catch a few shots of this thing if you manage to see it. The family member who was playing music from their phone forgot to turn off the speakers, but what you heard from them scared you more. The music was still playing, but it sounded severely distorted and disturbing. Whatever this thing was, it was interfering with the speaker's connection. This thing's screech was already causing your nerves to go haywire, and the distorted music certainly didn't help not one bit. You and your family use your flashlights to look around, trying to find whatever made that god-awful noise. That's when you see it. This slender, dark, around 10 to 15 foot tall thing standing in the trees. It has long, bony arms and legs, with razor-sharp claws at the ends of each of its long, slender fingers. This thing was nothing like you or any of your family had ever seen before. All of you are startled, a few scream out of pure shock and terror. You decide to run to your tent to get the huge hunting knife you always carried with you on trips like this, managing to snap a few photos of the creature with your camera as you run. You get inside your tent and start rummaging through it and your backpack, looking for the knife. You catch a glimpse of the photos you took, and what you saw shook you to the core. The creature was pitch black, with wide black eyes with pure white sclera. It has its mouth opened wide, exposing its horrendous long, sharp, fawn-like teeth. Its teeth and claws seem to be stained with a red substance. You immediately knew what the substance had to be, but you didn't have enough time to panic. Outside, you hear gunshots and the creature screeching in what sounds like agony as your family presumably starts to shoot at the creature, hoping to kill, injure, or at least scare it off. It didn't work though. A few horrified screams ring out through the thicket, and you notice the sight and sound of a dark substance splattering the outside of the tent. You dread to think what that substance could be, but you already know. You now had two options: either stay in the campsite and risk getting butchered by whatever that thing was, or book it for one of the trucks and hope you manage to drive to safety before that thing can catch up to you. You decide on the latter, unzip your tent, and climb out, carrying your shotgun and hunting knife you managed to take with you. You're horrified and heartbroken by the sight that greeted you. You found all of your family lying on the forest floor, covered in blood. You want to try to find any survivors, but judging by the scene, you know there just isn't saving any of them. You feel like breaking down sobbing right there, but you're on too much of an adrenaline high to do that. You start running towards the direction of the truck as fast as your legs can carry you, knowing you need to escape. That's when you hear the all too familiar screeching behind you, along with heavy footsteps. For how skinny that thing looked, it sounded quite heavy. You didn't even look back, you just ran faster. You start seeing the silhouette of the truck a few feet away from you, and you keep running. Just then, you trip on an oversized tree root and hit your head on a rock. Hard. Your vision is cloudy as your head spins, and your right leg feels like it's on fire. You look at your leg, and it's bending in a way that it isn't supposed to. You hit your leg on another, sharper rock. It seems like it impaled and shattered your leg, seeing how you fell. The last thing you remember hearing before everything went black is that terrifying screeching, along with thundering footsteps rapidly approaching. At least now, you'll be with your family in peace. Don't worry, my friend. Soon, everything will be over.